A very good morning to all of you. It's a splendid Sunday, and I'm very delighted to welcome you to Session 5, Day 3, Part 1 of the National Webinar, Tribal Life, Insiders and Outsiders Perspective. So, today we have four presenters with us. And before we get started with the webinar, there are a few things that I request you to keep in mind. First of all, the presenters will be given 20 minutes to speak. We request you to kindly adhere to the time limit. After the presentation, we'll have a question and answer discussion round. So the audience can post their comments, feedback, remarks in the chat box. The audience is also requested to keep themselves on mute throughout the session. And apart from the questions, we also welcome your feedback and remarks throughout. So the chat box will be open. And the presenters are requested to introduce themselves before they begin with the presentation. Also, I'm Manvi Chaudhary, a PhD research scholar at the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies. And on the behalf of the department, I welcome you all once again. And I would like to convey our sincerest gratitude and thanks to all of you out there for making this webinar such a huge success. Do know that your responses and tremendous support mean a lot to us. So now, without any further delay, I would like to invite the first presenter for the day, Ms. Siddhi. Siddhi, over to you.
Could you just check whether all four prepared presenters are there or not?
Siddhi is there, Dr. Rajula, Dr. Ankita, they're also there. Mr. Sundar, are you there? Mr. Sundar, can you hear me?
Is Preeti Sundar?
Yeah.
Not Mr. Sundar.
Preeti Sundar, no, sorry. Yeah.
Okay.
So, Siddhi, you may begin now. Please switch on your video.
Yeah. Good morning, everyone. Shall I share the screen? If I'm allowed.
Yes.
Just a second. Is it visible? The screen? Yeah.
Yes.
So, good morning, everyone. I'm Siddhi Jangar. I'm a research scholar in the Department of Modern Indian Languages and Literary Studies. And today I'm here to present a paper which I titled The Two Gypsy Tribe, Enlivening the Culture of Folk Music and Dance in Rajasthan for Centuries. Fortunately, all the art forms of Rajasthan belong to the lower caste people. If it is with the middle class, we would have lost it. I came across this sentence while watching the documentary The Lost Music of Rajasthan by BBC, and the sentence stayed with me. Rajasthan literally means the land of kings, known for its culture, heritage, history, and sand dunes is home to various communities and tribes of India. The sand of the desert is not the only one embracing the tribal people, but these tribes too have embraced the desert and enriched it with their culture and traditions. The folk music, dance, and art of Rajasthan, which is renowned all over India and different parts of the world, is the heritage highly influenced by these tribes, which include Mangniyar tribe, who are musicians, Bhil tribe, Gypsy tribes such as Banjaras, Bhopas, musicians and storytellers, and Kalbelias, who are snake charmers and dancers, etc. The origin of the Gypsy tribe is supposed to be dated many centuries back. Even the European Gypsies, the Romani people, an ethnic group composed of artisans and musicians residing in Europe, are believed to be migrated from Rajasthan many years ago. Bhopas and Kalbelias are the two major surviving groups of the Gypsy tribe. In contrast to the ancient times, when Rajas and Maharajas used to invite them to perform, and when they were valued for their art, both these groups in modern days are considered as the lowest in the socio-economic and socio-cultural stature of the society. With the history on which they are proud of, the art and the artists are struggling in the present. Now, coming to the art and culture of Kalbelia tribe, Kalbelias, also known as Cobra Gypsies, are well known for their snake charming skills, and for this they are also called snake charmers. The name Kalbelia denotes their dominance over the fear of death and poisonous snakes, as the term Kal literally connotes danger or death. Kalbelia claims to be the followers and descendants of Guru Gorakhnath, who founded the Nath community. There are different stories regarding how the community came into being. According to the Hindu mythological tale, they are the followers of Guru Kanipa, one of the disciples of Guru Gorakhnath and one of the 9 masters who used to reside alongside Lord Shiva on Mount Kailash. He drank the whole bowl of poison when offered by Lord Shiva in one gulp, which impressed Lord Shiva, and so his descendants were blessed to have the dominion over poison and snakes. While according to the other tale, Guru Gorakhnath was known for his magical powers, and when asked by Kanipa for a bowl of venom, he surprisingly presented him venom of a snake. And later Kanipa and his followers were instructed by the Guru to remain associated with the animal and protect it. And the other different versions of the tales the community believes in about their origin continues. Kalbelias used to catch snakes by charming them by playing bean or pungi, which is shown in the images in the slide here. It is a windpipe instrument consisting a reservoir into which wind is blown, channeling it into 2 reed pipes. The playing of the instrument demands circular breathing from the player, and so it should be played continuously without a break or pause. In the documentary Cobra Gypsies, filmed by Rafael Treza, and the images here are photo stills of the same documentary. There is a visual documentation of how Kalbelias find the nest of the snakes and how they follow the traces of the movements of snakes in the sand of the desert. And when found, finally, they catch the snake using a stick. If a snake was to be found in one of the houses of any village, instead of killing the snake, Kalbelias were called to catch the snake, as killing is considered inauspicious in the villages. Catching of the snake was often followed by the act of extracting the venom, which is then later sold to Ayurvedic medical practitioners who use this venom to make medicines. The venom, when dried, can be a great remedy for weak eyesight. Kalbelias claim that their eyesight has never been poor because they have been using snake venom for ages. After catching the snake, they used to put it in a basket made of bamboo pale, which was hung over their shoulders, as shown in the image here, wrapped in a cloth, while going out door to door in a village, where they exhibited their snakes and made them dance on the tunes of bean or pungi. They are bonded with snake through music and considered this gift of music as a blessing from their guru, as this music helps them to hypnotize snake and catch them. Though snakes are able to sense sound but are not able to hear music, they respond to the vibrations produced by the bean. The women of this tribe also sing and dance to the tunes of instruments such as pongi, chang, khartal, khanjari, dholak, morchang, and dafli. This traditional dance form of this tribe is named after the tribe itself and is known as Kalbelia dance, which is also recognized and enlisted by UNESCO in the list of intangible cultural heritage of humanity forms. The man of the tribe play the instrument and sing the song of heroes, lovers, and affection of the land, and the women dance and sing along with supple movements which resemble the movements of a snake. One of the famous songs on which Kalbelia dance is performed is Kaliyo Kood Padyo Mele Mein. The dancers wear an angrakhi, resembling short kurti, as shown in the image there. Odhni, dupatta covering their heads, and a long skirt on the lower body, known as ghagra, which is a traditional dress of the Kalbelia tribe with lots of traditional jewelry. This attire is essentially entirely black, decorated with red laces and having various patterns embroidered from a silver thread. It resembles the skin of a black snake with white patterns. This tradition of dancing, singing, and handling snakes, also being the source of earning a livelihood, has been transferred from one generation to another generation, and children start learning the art from early childhood, including catching snakes and holding them in their hands. This tribe mostly reside in the district of Pali, Udaipur, Ajmer, Chittorgarh, Jodhpur, and Jaisalmer of Rajasthan. In the past, all the people of this tribe used to move from one place to another, but now they have started trying to settle down, which is also difficult for them as they don't own any land of their own. Belonging to the scheduled tribes, they were considered untouchables until this discriminatory practice was abolished in 1950. But some of them are still prohibited from building their homes in the villages where upper caste people reside and entering the temples built for the upper caste Hindus. There are, at some places, they have made their own temple and worship Lord Shiva. There are some villages where only people from the Kalbelias tribe reside. But the condition of these villages is not worth mentioning. One of them is village Khedia in Bharatpur district, which can be glimpsed in the documentary Problems of Snake Charmers by Ashish Sharma. It is available on YouTube. Contrasting with the tradition of other Hindus, Kalbelias don't cremate their dead, but bury them. As they are not allowed to bury their dead anywhere else, some of them bury their dead in the very space they reside in. That is their houses. Till a few years back, the people of the tribe continued their profession of being snake charmers, but in 1972, Wildlife Protection Act was enacted, and so hunting and catching of snakes was prohibited, depriving them of their ancestral occupation and leaving them to look for some other professions. They continued performing dances at weddings and leaving them to look for some other professions. They continued performing dances at weddings and auspicious occasions. In the modern day, after being acknowledged by UNESCO, they also perform stage shows at the personal level and even with the help of NGOs at tourist places and even at places of heritage. A few of them started teaching the dance form to the tourists along with painting henna on their hands and making jewelry for livelihood. It is all shown in the images here. The ones who are good at their art even get a chance to perform at the national and international festivals organized by government or NGOs, including the folk festivals organized in the state, such as Rajasthan International Folk Festival, which is popularly known as RIF and is organized in Jodhpur. One of the examples of the famous Kalbelias dancers is Gulabo Sapera, who is well recognized and even awarded with Padma Shri. The remaining others of this community who aren't able to earn well from their art have switched their source of income to other professions, like building homes for others, when they ironically themselves have no permanent homes, being shepherds, agriculture workers, horse trainers, selling henna art, rearing donkeys and sheep, teaching them dances, etc. Now, the second tribe which has been enlivening the folk music of Rajasthan is Bhopa Tribe. Hailing from the village of Pabusar, Bhopas are the people who belong to the community of musicians and storytellers of the Gypsy tribe and belong to the cult of Pabuji. In earlier times, they worked as entertainers of the Maharajas. Traditionally, they were bard priests who used to sing the praises and story of Pabuji, a great folk hero of 14th century AD, who is worshipped as the god of the desert. They follow the Bhopa Bhopi tradition in which both husband and wife respectively sing together the verses. So it becomes necessary for a Bhopa to marry Bhopi who can sing well. Otherwise, the marriage doesn't happen. Boys and girls of this community start learning singing from their fathers and mothers respectively since early days of their childhood. And by repeatedly hearing it, they are able to memorize and sing these verses at quite an early age. Babu Rathod. Babu Rathod, known as Pabuji, who is worshipped as a folk deity, was a Rajput. It is believed that it was Pabuji who brought camels to the land of Rajasthan. The story of Pabuji, which is written in the form of an epic, and is narrated by the Bhopas, generally during the night, is known as Babuji Ki Fard. It is a painting, mostly painted on a cloth, which is here shown here in the slide. The painting depicts the court of Babuji, and it is worshipped by the Bhopas, and it is well known as Fard generally. And the divinity, the painting depicts the court of Babuji and the divinity of his character as a reincarnation of Lakshmana, the younger brother of Lord Rama of Ramayana. It narrates Babuji's life, his various exploits, and the tale of the revenge taken by his nephew upon the man who killed his name, Jindrav Khichi. Fard. The fard is a tapestry not painted by Bhopas themselves, but by professional painters, known as Sitero, also known by the clan Joshi. These fards are painted in the traditional towns of Bhilwara and Shahpura in the Bhilwara district of Rajasthan. The pictures on the tapestry themselves narrate the story of Babuji, depicting the events of the story. The fard is considered sacred and so is worshipped by the Bhopas. Rather than being folded, the cloth is always rolled, specifically from left to right, and then it is carried by Bhopa with them. It is never brought by Bhopas themselves, but gifted to them by someone else, then it is passed down to the next generation. The singing of this epic usually takes place at night till the break of dawn. People wake up the whole night to worship the deity, known as Jagran in the local language. A lamp is lighted, offerings are made in front of the fard, which is enfolded and tied in from two poles. Bhopis stand in front of the fard.
I'm sorry for interrupting in between. Just a reminder, you are left with 5 minutes to wrap up.
I'm about to finish anyway.
Okay, great.
Yeah. Which is enfolded and tied from two poles. Bhopi stands in front of the fard, holding the lamp while Bhopa plays music and sing verses. Bhopi accompanies him on the verses. The music is played on a stringed instrument made up of coconut shell, bamboo, steel, and horsehair using a bow named as Ravan Hatta, which is shown here in the slide. It is believed that these verses contain healing power, and whenever any person, any cattle from any household gets sick, Bhopas are called to sing these verses. In modern days, there are not more than 7 to 8 Bhopas in entire Rajasthan who narrates the story of Babuji, and either consider modernization the reason or changes in people's religious beliefs. Anyhow, people have started losing faith in the traditional narrative of Babuji too, and so no one calls these Bhopas anymore. Similar to the Kalvaria tribe, in order to survive, Bhopas too have started moving towards other sources of income, and they too are focusing on trying to educate their children, which is difficult for them because of no permanent home and no availability of schools. Till now, they have sustained through singing, including singing and begging, and making Ravan Hatta for tourists, which doesn't promise them much earning. Some of them still subsist as the semi-nomadic tribe, performing on streets, fairs, and festivals, but they are aware that neither the next generation is willing to learn this art, nor the art will help them survive. If they can't earn their livelihood through this art, then the art and centuries-old tradition are lost. Problems of these tribes. Both these communities are amongst the vanishing cultures of Thar Desert, with no permanent residency, no proper income, and no proper educations. Both these communities are deprived of the social identity they should have. Many of them lack documentation proof of their identity as residents of this land, and so they lack identity not only socially, but even in government files. This lack of documentation makes it difficult for them to access the welfare schemes and programs started by the state and central government for the development of these tribes. The nomadic nature adds up to the difficulties. These are poor and downtrodden castes. They even have to beg for daily food when there is no other source of income or way of survival. The major problems these communities face are chronic poverty and identity crisis. For Kalbelia, exclusion from society and discrimination can be added to their list of problems. They are viewed with constant suspicion of being thieves and criminals with no source of income from tourists, fairs, festivals, social gatherings, and performances. Their condition worsened even further in the pandemic. I'm coming to my conclusion. These tribes didn't have any educated ancestors who could have written down their history and told the world about their past. History has always been written by the ones who hold the power, but their art has been their voice over the past centuries. They have been living on this land for centuries and have been adapting and improvising their lifestyles with the changing times, and hopefully they will continue to do so. But I fear that if these traditions of music and dance are no longer able to provide them with livelihood, the instinct of survival will force them to switch their profession, and the remaining people of the tribe who are still keeping this heritage alive will no longer be able to preserve it. To preserve this art, the government and the people of the state need to acknowledge the significance of these tribes as they have acknowledged the worth and value of the art forms. They should be treated more respectfully, and providing them with basic necessities of life, such as food, shelter, education, and employment, and identity, should be the prime step taken by the government towards the welfare of these communities. Thank you.
Thank you, Siddhi. That was an incredibly interesting paper, and what a visual delight. I really liked your paper, and I really enjoyed it. I'm sure we have questions. Let me just check. And we do. So, Siddhi, we have two questions for you. The first question is how the indigenous knowledge of catching snakes is transmitted and accepted by the outsiders. And the second question for you is, do they also get intoxicated taking the snake bites themselves?
Answering the first question, they are taught to not be afraid of snakes from the childhood. They are, as I showed in the first slide, that the god they worship are showed holding a snake in their hand, trying to extract the venom. And so the children from their elders, they see and try to not be afraid of the snakes. They do get intoxicated sometimes by snake bites, but these tribes actually know how to extract the venom from a body when someone is bitten by a snake. So it's like they know their cure and remedy for it. So yeah.
Okay. And your response to the second question?
Yeah, I told it.
Yeah,
I just said it. Yeah.
So let me check if you have any more questions. Siddhi, I had a question for you. You mentioned something about jewelry, that the tribe, they wear some kind of special jewelry. What is the significance of that jewelry? Could you tell us a bit about that? Is there a particular kind of jewelry?
Yeah, it is more about they wear heavy metals. In the state of Rajasthan is mostly um, has high temperature, right? So the metals are like, it is scientifically proven that if we wear metals in the toes and in neck or something, they try to transmit cool from the earth, and right, so they wear heavy jewelry. But it is not only metal, they have the cultural jewelry with the woven threads and other materials. So it's not necessarily metals, because not everyone there is financially stable to wear the gold and silver. So yeah, it is mostly the cultural significance, more of like, how should I say, health.
Yeah, it's
Health,
their
yeah.
jewelry. Yeah. Okay. So if we don't have any more questions, all right. So that's all, Siddhi. Thank you so much. It was a great presentation. You can now switch off your video. Yeah. Thank you. All right. So now we'll move on to our next presentation, and I would like to invite Dr. Anjala Upadhyay to come forward and present a paper. Ma'am, could you please switch on your video and also introduce yourself before you begin with your presentation? Over to you, ma'am. Thank you.
Thank you, Manvi. Good morning, everyone. I am Dr. Angela Upadhyay, and I teach in Satyavati College. I have been privileged to do my PhD under Professor Patnaik and in this department. So I have a sense of belonging here. And I want to begin with congratulating the organizing team and sir for giving us this opportunity all the time. We have a lot of appreciation for that, sir. So with this, I'll begin my presentation. The title of my paper is Ballad of Rajula and Malu Shahi in the Folklore of Kumaon, Oral and Performance Traditions. Kumaon derives its name from kurma or tortoise, which is believed to be the second incarnation of Lord Vishnu. According to local legends, Kurma Avatar stood for 3 years on a mountain here, which is the reason it was called Kurmachal, which later became Kumaon. It is a land of rich cultural heritage mentioned in popular religious texts like Ramayana, Mahabharata, and many Puranic scriptures. The Ballad of Rajula and Malu Shahi is a very prominent and well-known piece in the oral tradition of Kumaon. It celebrates the romantic love story of a king and an ordinary girl who have been immortalized for their steadfast love. The ballad is a window to the cultural life of Kumaon and provides a glimpse of the richness of its folklore. It is found in different versions because folklore can never be penned down to one fixed form. Oral traditions provide a testimony of the past and nameless people in any community and existed in almost all societies before the beginning of the written word. It helps in understanding human societies because it reveals a lot about the aspirations, values, and emotional behavior of the people. Ben Amos observes, and I quote, historically, folklore allegedly dated back to time immemorial, and hence, at its original stage, preceded any known recorded history. When man hunted and gathered his food, or even when he began to farm the land and to herd his cattle, but had not yet quite mastered writing, he was already narrating tales and singing songs, unquote. Thus, it is not surprising that oral tradition has been the channel which propagated and preserved the essence of all religious and spiritual paths for the successive generation. It is rich in song, poetry, myth, and parable, which have a more lasting and stronger impact in safeguarding the core of the doctrine than the codes and dogmas of the formal scriptural text. In India, the two major religious epics, Ramayana and Mahabharata, were transmitted orally by religious singers. The oral tradition of India is confined not only to poetry, but also has a rich repository of narrative fiction, which is exemplified in the storytelling models in Katha Sarita Sagara and Jataka tales. The spoken word is considered more pure and grammatically correct because it conveys the right meaning enabled by correct pronunciation as well as the simultaneous presence of speaker and the listeners. The major schools of Indian philosophy, such as Mimamsa, Tantra, Yoga, and Prabhakaras, viewed and interpreted the origin and nature of universe through exploring the nature and manifestation of the sound. Accordingly, ancient Indian linguistic culture preserved sacred texts and the purity of language by memorizing them in a systematic manner through an elaborate and meticulous system of recitations. In most societies, traditions are repeated without any innovations because they are dictated by beliefs rooted in community life, which it preserves seamlessly. As observed by Ellen Dundes, I quote, the amazing thing is that the folklore in vast majority of cases is saved for posterity without the aid of writing or print. One must remember that in most of the cultures of the world, all the information culturally defined as important is passed on orally. Unquote. Rajula Malu Shahi is an example of the richness of oral tradition of Kumaon. A short summary of the ballad will be useful in understanding the main characters and important events in this narrative, which begins with the stories of the parents of the titular characters. Malu Shahi's parents are King Dula Shahi and Queen Dharwa Devi of Berar and could have been among the rulers of Katyuri dynasty which is believed to have ruled Kumaon between 7th and 10th century AD. Rajula's father, Sunapati Shok, and mother Ganguly live in the border areas of Kumaon. Sunapati is a Bhotia traveling trader who barters salt and wool from Tibet and sells these commodities in the lower regions. Both the couples are childless and instructed in their dreams by goddess to undertake a pilgrimage. They meet each other and become friends while sharing their common sorrows and even exchange a promise of marriage between their yet unborn children. By the grace of gods, Dharma Devi gave birth to a son, Malushahi, and Ganguly is blessed with a very beautiful daughter, Rajula. Malushahi, being a prince, is married at a young age to 7 girls. Rajula also grows up to become a young girl endowed with extraordinary beauty, brilliance, and keen wit. Her father, Sunapati, visits Bharat every year with Tibetan goods. On one of these business trips, Rajula accompanies her father, meets Malushahi, and falls in love with him. The lovers meet secretly, but one day Sunapati learns of this development and leaves Bharat in the middle of the night to avoid a chase. Malushahi learns of Rajula's departure and is heartbroken. Meanwhile, Sunapati wants to marry Rajula to the Tibetan prince and he leaves to finalize the marriage. Rajula takes advantage of her father's absence and sets out to meet Malushahi. The journey is long and perilous, but overcoming all difficulties, she manages to reach Malushahi's palace one night but cannot wake him because of a magic spell she herself has used to freely enter his palace. Rajula leaves a letter for Malushahi, daring him to bring her back as a wife honorably if his love for her is true. Malushahi disguises himself as an ascetic and reaches Rajula's native place. After months of wandering, he finds Rajula and starts living in her palace disguised as a saint. One day, he is discovered by Sunapati, who poisons him and throws his body in snow covered mountains and forcibly marries Rajula. Meanwhile, Malushahi's mother learns about her death from a crow and she sends her brother to bring Malushahi back. He knows black magic and he brings Malushahi back to life with his magic potions. Then they fight the Tibetan prince and bring Rajula back to Bharat, where she is married to Malushahi and made his principal queen. This is the summary of this long narrative. So this is not just an ordinary love story, but its vast scope makes it epic in dimension. And it is not without reason that it is often described as the oral epic of Kumaon. It has the following epic features. The first and foremost epic feature of Rajula and Malushahi is its origin in the oral tradition of Kumaon, because most epics originate in the oral traditions. It has a strong narrative structure and is sung to the accompaniment of musical instrument, like all epics, which were recited to an audience orally and written down much later. It is a well-known fact that epics have ornate language, but the present piece has been sung in the remote villages of Kumaon, and the singers are mostly illiterate people using colloquial dialect. Nevertheless, one finds the ornamentation such as epic similes, panegyric, and detailed descriptions of characters as well as their surroundings. Though it seems to be a simple love story, but the conflict is of epic dimension due to the social positioning of the main characters. Malushahi is the king of a prosperous land, and when he decides to go in search of his beloved, his army of 9 light soldiers accompany him disguised as ascetics. This large-scale commotion reinforces the fact that Rajula and Malushahi are not only deciding on the course of their lives, but also shaping the destinies of their respective communities. There is a strong supernatural element in the narrative because the protagonists are born with divine blessing. They meet for the first time near a temple. Rajula is helped and rescued in her solitary journey through the blessings of God. And the last sections of narrative show great use of charm and magic. Maluchai is miraculously kept alive under snow for 6 months, after which he is brought back to life. All these overwhelming presence of supernatural component is a reminiscent of epic poetry. Another recurrent feature of epic is the prominence given to the journeys. And Rajula Malushahi has many adventurous journeys with drama, suspense, and hardships associated with the classical concept of epic journeys. Epic employs the technique of cataloging, having long portions dealing with detailed description of the characters, their attire, their armaments, their possessions, which is also found in this ballad. There are many digressions in the narrative, which is another recurrent feature of epic poetry. The above analysis shows the epic features present in this ballad, which establish it as the oral epic of Kumaun indeed. It has a versatile and vibrant story, which draws the audience or the reader immediately into an enchanted world of beauty and love, created so vividly that one can almost step into it. The huge scale and high drama results in an absolute surrender of reason and an unquestioning acceptance by the mesmerized audience. The other noteworthy aspect of this narrative is its performance. Performance traditions are an integral part of the folklore and have a widespread presence in all cultures. The bulk of verbal folklore exists in performance because folk songs, tales, narratives, and riddles were not conceptualized for a reading public. The ballad Rajula and Malu Shahi can take up more than 10 hours for a complete performance. Therefore, it is not easy to recite it in a single sitting. In earlier days, it used to be sung for 7 to 8 nights, and people would gather night and after night to listen to some famous singer who happened to visit their villages. The zeal and enthusiasm to hear out yet another time an already well-known story puts it in a category similar to the Ram Leelas performed all over India before the festival of the Shara. Any piece of folklore gets a new lease of life whenever it is performed. It depends for its survival on repeating renderings because it lives in the memory of those who tell and those who assemble to listen to it. The narrative nature of the ballad gives it an intense quality which cannot be experienced if it is merely read. This brings us to the most important pillar of any performance, the audience. Today, it is a recognized fact that folktales and myths are not simply told, they are performed by the narrator and his audience. This statement by Bascom aptly describes the importance of the role played by an audience within a performance situation. It would be completely wrong to suppose that within a traditional folk performance, the audience is receiving whatever is being doled out by the singer. It is the acceptance of the listeners which validate the position of the folk singer. He is not recording in a mechanized setting for an audio company and does not have to wait for the commercial success of his venture to judge the reaction of his listeners. In a folk performance, the artist is very close to the audience in a spatial sense and can easily understand their response uh, of encouragement or negative reception. There's a very strong emotional bonding between them, and the audience is not only required to complete any performance, but it is also complements the artist in many obvious and subtle ways. When an artist is performing in front of a live audience, he is found to be influenced by the size, constitution, and expectation of the audience community. Claus in Coron explained this phenomena, and I quote, each performance event is a sort of negotiation between the community and often between different elements within the community and the performer. While the performer has control over the performance, the community has control over the tradition. If they don't like the performance or its interpretation, they cease attending it or refuse to acknowledge the author as a practitioner. Folklore is thus an emergent phenomenon. It is a complex process that is shaped, evaluated, and recreated in each performance. Unquote. In the light of the above statement, it is clearly established that audience community determines the nature of performance and is an important ingredient for its very existence and continuation. The life in the rural world has changed considerably, and this has affected the cultural scenario, including the type of recreation preferred by the people. It is very seldom that anyone organizes a performance of narratives like Rajula and Malu Shahi. The ballad in
I'm
its
sorry
traditional.
for the interruption. We left with 5 minutes to wrap up the paper.
Yes, thank you. The ballad in its traditional form is becoming rarer to find, though it marks its presence in various literary genres. The absence of a robust performance tradition is creating a vacuum in understanding its inherent melodious beauty. Though it has been published in many different formats, it actually lives in the memories of those who saw it performed in its traditional form. This fact was experienced during the field visit from the accounts of people associated with the ballad and those who have heard the ballad from some folk singer in its traditional form. Kumaon has a vast repository of folk songs, narratives, anecdotes, etc., which are fast receding from the communal memory because of the changing scenario. And the ballad of Rajula and Malu has also suffered from the apathetic attitude of the audience, driving it to oblivion. In the modern world of industrialization, urbanization, dislocation, and electronic entertainment, the traditional means of recreation are battling for survival. The social life of villages has greatly shrunk as most people have left their homes for jobs in cities. The remaining few are glued to their television sets and mobile phones. The enthusiastic crowd of villagers who happily assembled for a performance are missing. Consequently, the performers are also dwindling, and hardly any professional singer is actively practicing these folk songs. In earlier days, the singers were honored by masses as well as affluent families, and the entire village used to offer their hospitality. But the situation is different now, and no one aspires to become a professional singer. And even the children of famous singers are not embracing the legacies of their families. Rajula and Malu stands out in the folk narrative of Kumaon for its rich content, engrossing story, and well-developed characters. It has a strong plot with a meaningful and logical chain of events that keeps the interest of the audience tied to it. It has a special place in the collective memory and a great recall value. Even though it is not performed regularly, most people in Kumaon recognize the names of the protagonists. The ballad has generated interest certified by its presence in various formats. One finds numerous renderings of the story in diverse formats such as songs, plays, TV serials, radio plays, along with written and published poems, novels, and short stories. With the advent of social media and platforms like YouTube, the ballad is reviving in various audiovisual models. This ballad is a representative piece of performing tradition of Kumaon's folk narrative. It has a lot of socio-cultural and historical importance because the people of Kumaon believe that the episodes mentioned in the ballad actually took place within a recognizable landscape in a distant but remembered past. This uh, oft-heard timeless tale is significant because it throws light on the vibrant cultural life of Kumaon. Any piece of folklore survives through the people who preserve and propagate it. But in the modern fast-paced world, there is a shrinking of traditions amongst the masses. Hence, there is an urgent need to safeguard the cultural wealth by recognizing and reviving these priceless pieces of folklore for the contemporary and future generations. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. That was a very engaging presentation. I'm sure we have questions for you. So we have a question from Dr. Pankaj Sharma. He asks, I really want to know, is there continuity of this folk epic ballad and allied folk traditions in the present life and literature?
Yeah, as I mentioned, the traditional performance in the way it used to be performed, that is of course not there because people, if at all it is performed, it would be performed on some cultural platform, and nobody would be having the kind of time, 9 or 10 hours. So some small portion, some popular portions would be performed. But yes, continuity is there, as I told you. It has not only in the printed format, but I found, I was just looking at the YouTube, and I found many people, some are singing, and one or two people are actually one can hear only the audio. They are singing in the format which is traditional, as the recordings of some famous singers have been preserved in Sangeet Natak Academy, and I heard those during my research. My PhD is also on this, so quite similar to what I heard. Some famous singers like Mohan Singh and Gopal Das, they are doing, and there are many different parts, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So I believe they are singing whatever text they have, they're trying to recreate it in full. Yes. So there is continuity.
Right, ma'am. We have a few more questions for you. So the next question is from Vinayak sir. How much historical elements are there in the narrative, and how do common people accept that?
Yeah, as I told you, historically, if we try to go historically, I told you that the kind of the things that are mentioned in the ballad, they can be historically correlated. For example, this Malu is a Katyuri king, but and they have ruled for about 300 years. But as happens with all small principalities, they had disintegrated into various branches. So he could have been from one or the other branches. There are actually historical proof of Katyuri dynasty in terms of their temple engravings, and in terms of sometimes they have these shilas, sometimes they have erected some kind of documentary proof like stones, that is there. But otherwise also people have no doubt that this thing did not happen. And in fact, it is found. I have focused only on Kumaon, but the some versions are found even in Garhwal. So people believe, and when I was doing my field work, people told me that this is where, Rajula used to travel. This is the path she took, and there's a belief, and some of it might be some parts can be historically correlated. Though I'm not a researcher of history, I was looking at it from the point of view of oral tradition. But I think yes, because the kind of belief that people have, that this actually they relate it to certain historical events. And Bhotias, we all know they were the traveling traders, and they used to trade between the Tarai of Kumaon and Tibet. So I traveled, in fact, to till the last point, which is approachable by road, and that is an area which is dominated by the Bhotia community. So there are also people very they have strong belief that yes, this is where it happened. This is where is there, and because they used to be a very prosperous community. The very name Sunapati, actually it means someone who has a lot of gold. These traders, they used to be very prosperous. It is only after the closure of after the Indo-China conflict in 1960s, that these routes were closed, and so their lives changed. So yes, historical correlation can be done.
Thank you, ma'am. Allow me to take a few more questions, if that's fine.
Yeah. Yeah.
So we have another question from Mamta Sharma, and she writes, this epic has been converted into many Hindi and English novels and a play as well, where this conversion helps in maintaining the existence of folk narrative, at least in written form. It's very oral, nature collapse, as not only the language but the structure also changed completely during such a conversion. Which category do you place such texts, in fiction or oral tradition? Or we need a different category to put such texts in?
As I told you that the ballad, as we know, in oral tradition, the traditional form is what used to be sung. That of course, I don't think we can count any of the written format as that tradition. But we can say that these are adaptations. These are adaptations, and people are creatively dabbling with different formats. For this, they're taking the basic story and they're dabbling in various forms. As I told you, there are radio plays, there are written plays, there are stories, there are novels, but there are at least 3-4 printed printed versions of the ballad as it is sung, with the intonations, you see. So all other formats, of course, they will have different structures, so they can at best be called adaptations. They are not the traditional, even the printed ballad as it is sung, the transcript of the printed ballad, I cannot even call that the original oral tradition, because it is something which is in performance. But obviously, for the purpose of study, I also relied on these texts as primary, because it is very difficult to find someone who will perform. I met some children of some of the singers. They performed it for me for a short time, but nobody is doing it on the full scale. As you can understand, this is not called an epic for without any reason. It is a very long thing. I have given you a very short summary because I just wanted people to be familiar with the basic storyline. It takes up to 10 hours. So that these are all, I think, at best adaptations, but it is heartening that people are at least aware of this tradition. And as I told you on YouTube, there is something. There it is some. Sorry.
So, ma'am, allow me to take the last question.
Yes, why not?
Yeah. So we have another question from Dr. Pankaj Sharma. Are there any academic and cultural efforts done to popularize and resolution?
Academic and cultural efforts, I can only see that people people are interested. I have not seen. Of course, in Kumaon, I traveled around, but I did not see it as part of the curriculum, at least when I was doing my research. But people are reading cultural efforts. I would see that sometimes, I keep getting on WhatsApp that there's this play on this topic. Sometimes there is a cultural performance. So on these cultural platforms, whenever there is some kind of celebration, at least government celebrations, sometimes these things will find a space. And yes, there is now in every state there's a ministry of culture. So they would be doing an academic. As I told you that I found two full length transcripts. So that also is a kind of an academic endeavor to preserve. That is how I could access it. Otherwise, it would have been impossible for me to get the full text now that no singer is actively practicing. So, but as I told you, I heard someone on the YouTube, and they are trying to revive it, which is something which is appreciable. Yes. Is there another question? I think there is another.
All right. We have more questions, but
Okay.
I don't think I'll be able to accommodate. I request you to, maybe have a conversation in the chat box, ma'am, if you can access it, because we have two more presentations. So
Yes,
thank you once again, ma'am. It was a very interesting.
No, thank you so much for all of you who participated and took so much of interest. Thank you so much. Thank you, MIL.
Thank you, ma'am. All right.
Okay.
All right, so now we'll move on to our next presentation, and can we have Dr. Ankita Gupta, please? Dr. Ankita, please switch on your video and introduce yourself before you begin with your presentation. Over to you,
Ankita. Hi, good morning to everyone. Am I audible and visible as well?
Yes, sir.
Okay, thank you so much, Manvi. Thank you everyone for organizing this wonderful webinar, and it gives me great pleasure that the first webinar of this series was organized with respect to folk culture and folk life last year, when I was part of the department and I was pursuing my PhD there. And I'm elated that I have joined the second part of this continuing series focusing on tribal culture. And now that I'm an ex-student of the department, I am currently working as a content writer, and I have been a part of this department for about 7 years. I did my master's, MPhil, and PhD from the Department of Modern Indian Languages. So I feel a great sense of affinity to the department. And I would really like to thank Professor Patnaik for initiating this series and continuing with this even this year. So now I would like to begin my paper. Can I share my screen, Manvi?
Yes, Ankita, please.
All right. Is it visible now?
Yes, it's very
Okay. So let me first introduce you to my topic. I will be talking about I will be doing a comparative analysis of tribal culture versus metropolitan culture, and I will be focusing on understanding the rituals and customs pertaining to menstruation across India. Now, as a disclaimer, from the beginning of the presentation itself, I want to say that I am not homogenizing the experience of the various tribes in India, and the word tribal culture is just used as a categorical representation of how we distinguish tribes from what we distinguish metro cities. And there will be in no way a homogenization of experiences or rituals of any kind throughout the presentation. So let me begin. Um, in my presentation, uh, let me begin with the introduction of the presentation. The basic research statement of my presentation is that in this paper, I'm trying to understand the rituals and customs of menstruation across various Indian tribes and delve in a comparative analysis of the same with respect to the cultural dynamics of the metropolitan cities on the menstrual discourse. This paper is proposed to give a brief insight into the vast difference that exists in the lives of menstruators who are part of various Indian tribes as opposed to the residents of metropolitan cities. In my paper, I have basically used the research methodology that we can call comparative cultural analysis. And the main resources that I have used are personal narratives, interviews, and field data that I have accumulated over the last, I would say, 7-8 years, when I was not even working focusedly on menstruation. I was just having conversations with people around me, trying to understand what they feel about menstruation. So these are very, very interesting insights that have been shared with me throughout the last 7-8 years. And in my paper, I will be focusing on the following tribes. Chenchu tribe from Andhra Pradesh, another tribe which is either called Lambadi, Banjara, or Sugali tribe, also belonging to Telangana and Andhra Pradesh region. Siddhi tribe from Karnataka, few tribes with common etiquettes and beliefs around menstruation from Bihar. Bavadia tribe from Punjab, Paiti tribe from Manipur, and few other tribes of Lamka, which also have shared etiquettes belonging to Manipur. My paper is basically divided into the following sections. The first part of my paper will be focusing on heterogeneity of menstrual discourse. Then I will be moving forward talking about metropolitan narrative versus tribal narrative, the points of difference. The next categorization is tribal rituals and menarche, menstrual impurity with celebratory hues. I will be looking at all these things from an insider's view and then comparing it to an outsider's view, because I personally am an outsider to the tribal culture and belong to the metropolitan space. Further on, I will be looking at menstrual impurity beyond the basic premise of menarche. I will look at how rituals have changed. Further, looking into the commonalities among the two cultural categories that I'm talking about, the metropolitan and the tribal culture. I will be looking at points of comparison and making a case about menstrual paraphernalia, and then I will be talking about the future of research. So, let me start. As soon as a native from any remote or rural part of India takes a step into any metropolitan space, the stark difference of culture becomes extremely clear. This difference is not the so-called superficial difference of what can be considered modern versus traditional, but it is in fact a confrontation of alternate realities that are both equally real and present in stark contrast to one another, while each possessing their own truths as diametrically opposite. While the rituals and customs of the metropolitan cities may vary from city to city, depending on the state to which the metro belongs, there are and will be certain characteristics which remain common amongst these spaces. This can be easily observed in the manners of conversation, in the ways people make time and space for their rituals and customs, and in the way these rituals change over time as convenience and education takes precedence over a repository of culture. Um, that is reflected through the means of ritualization of these very customs over the years. Though this may be true for rituals and customs in all aspects of life, one important constant that has continued to gain limelight in the discourse of ritualization is the discourse of menstruation. One may easily argue that the impact of cinema and media has had a major role to play in the kind of narrative that has turned around the discourse of menstruation in the metropolitan spaces, giving us a lopsided view of a society that has become more aware and more understanding of the issues pertaining to menstruation. But contrary to popular belief, the facade of a metropolitan city is something that speaks of a very restricted reality of Indian population. In a common man's house, in any metropolitan city, one may find a vast degree of differentiation within the family, depending on the number of generations that reside at the home at any given time. A younger generation may have been born and brought up in the city, in the metro city, whereas the second generation may have moved to the cities in their prime years of career making and may have dragged along with them the older family generations that may have remained removed from the realities of the metropolitan lives for the greater part of their lives. Thus, it would be an understatement to suggest that the lived realities of two generations in the same household could be the same when it comes to the experiences of menstruation, let alone commenting on the metropolitan spaces as a whole geographical and political space. However, there are certain experiences that one can clearly demarcate as exclusively metropolitan, or at least pertaining to the realities of the educated upper middle class of the bigger cities. These elite few can be considered to have had an experience so aggressively unique to those of their counterparts residing in their native places in tier 2, tier 3 cities and in remote and rural areas that their issues may appear like first world problems to a common Indian residing in the villages of India, who is still dealing with third world problems when it comes to the discourse like menstruation. Don't get me wrong. This comparison of the first world and the third world may clearly have larger political implications that suggest India in general is considered as a third world nation across the world. But we would be kidding ourselves if we live under the illusions that there isn't an India within India, the truest heart of India that lies in the villages and its jungles, which is so far removed from the realities of the metropolitan space that in comparison, we can find that they are in fact the third world spaces in contrast to these metro counterparts. These areas that lie in the periphery and have succumbed to the discourses that remain residual deserve to be heard and understood. Make no mistake, I don't claim to offer an insider's perspective on the discourse of the folk life and tribal culture of these very spaces. But in the very least, I hope to bring out that these experiences highlight a great degree of variance and have equal, if not more, relevance despite the popular discourses that come to fore through the metropolitan narratives. When I talk about metropolitan narratives, I mean discourses where there are conversations about menstrual leave policies in offices, discourses where there are open mics, such as the ones I myself have conducted in cafes and university spaces, where artists, researchers, and speakers like ourselves come together to discuss the dialogue over the discourse of menstruation, along with the extreme need of awareness that about the use of alternative sustainable products of menstrual hygiene management. In the metropolitans, the whole narrative around menstruation for menstrual has become something more than a luxury, at least for the educated upper middle class that claims to have agency, rights, voice, and choice. The narrative around menstruation has moved from an issue of women to an issue of menstruators, in fact. Pad dispensing machines have started becoming a more and more common sight. discussions on preference of cloth pads over plastic pads, or tampons over pads, or even menstrual cups over tampons has become a more and more common trend. Would I be wrong in stating that the menstrual reality for a large section of the metropolitan spaces is misrepresented of the actual issues around the discourse of menstruation? The issues that menstruators face in remote and rural areas, or even within the crevices of these very metros, the margins or nooks and crannies of these metros where migrants from all across the country come in search of work. The issues that ropes of ritualization and customs have tied across the feet of menstruators who have neither access to modern technology, knowledge, nor the luxury to make a choice of their preferred menstrual product, are they even remotely close to the narratives that one finds in the discussions of the metropolitan consumer? I think it would be interesting to find out through the course of a comparative analysis of tribal culture versus metropolitan culture within the context of menstruation. Now, as an individual, I myself, who has lived most of my life in metros, it would be right to state that I, for one, can never have a complete hold over the inner perspectives of what menstruators feel about the rituals associated with menstruation practiced within their folk communities or within their tribal realities. But the first half of this paper is enough to help us create a base for comparative analysis with a select few tribal experiences that I have illustrated below, to understand just about how unique and different these two realities are from one another. In large part of the country, women still considering purchasing a pad a luxury. The most commonly used items for taking care of menstrual flow include items such as cow dung, dried leaves, charcoal, ashes, and mud. A vast majority of them continue to use old rags torn out of older cloth pieces that have dampened over a course of time. Some of them continue to reuse clothes over and over again, while others never get an opportunity to dry these clothes in the sun, lest it offend the sight of the community members. There are also few who are treated like untouchables within their own families, where even sharing a meal together is considered a great taboo during the time of menstruation. And touching or coming in contact with the menstruator is considered to be so impure that it is even popularized as a cause of fatality for those who come in contact with the menstruator. If these everyday examples of individuals from the hinterlands of India are not enough to bring forth the extreme disparity in the narratives of the menstrual discourse in the different parts of a country, a few examples below will suffice to illustrate the heterogeneity of menstrual experiences across the various tribes in India. Albeit not all experiences, rituals, and customs are negative. Some are misrepresented, while others are layered with undertones of sacred versus taboo, making it difficult to assess whether these narratives can be painted in a negative or a positive light. Let's take a look at a few examples. As I talked about, the Chenchu tribe, which is from Andhra Pradesh. So on the attainment of puberty, the menstruating girl is supposed to stay in a corner of the house. The room for her is plastered with cow dung, and after cleaning it, the girl is given a turmeric speared milk arrow. The newly pubertal girl is assisted by an older woman who helps her drape the turmeric cloth, and then turmeric powder is anointed on her body. While a small celebration takes place in the evening where the girl is decorated with ornaments, the menstruating girl herself is considered extremely dangerous and inauspicious and must remain confined to a restricted space. This celebratory occasion is accompanied by traditional song singing by the women of the tribe. Moving on to another tribe, the Lambadi, also known as Banjara or Sugali tribe of Andhra and Telangana region of India. The pubertal girls in this tribe are similarly kept secluded in a hut made of leaves outside the main house. Here, the girl is considered vulnerable to spirits, which are kept at bay by placing margosa leaves outside the hut. The girl is considered unclean for 7 days and is fed food in separate utensils. On the 5th night or the 6th morning of the onset of her menarche, she is made to bathe in water mixed with jekya, kunkudkaya, and cow's urine that is considered to rid her of her pollution. Even on the 7th and 8th day, she is considered to be under partial pollution. This tribe, however, chooses not to announce a girl's menarche in any public form. Please, I'm sorry for the mispronunciation of the two cultural words. The Siddhi tribe from Karnataka. In this tribe, the girl at her menarche is prohibited from stepping out of the house for the first 5 days. On the 6th day, she is required to take a bath with warm water, which is followed by adornment with green bangles, and done, which is done by 5. Yes.
I apologize for interrupting. We left with 5 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. She has to take a bath with warm water, and this is followed by adornment with green bangles, which is done by 5 married women. The girl is then seated on a wooden stool in the center of the house, and the female guests perform a rite called Anathi. The girl is gifted with various auspicious objects, including flowers, areca nuts, rice, etc. And this is accompanied by jovial song singings pertaining to puberty. Considering that most of these rituals ascribe a negative position to the menstruating body itself, while at the same time these tribes rejoice the occurrence of menarche, the rituals amongst these tribes hold mixed connotations with respect to menstruation. Now, several conversations with girls belonging to the tribes and communities that celebrate menarche in some form may be denigrating the menstrual body, illustrate that most of them feel a sense of shame with the community disclosure of a personal experience. There are also a few women from this community who say that they enjoy this celebration and this specialized, this kind of special treatment that they receive pertaining to their growing up. When I spoke to women who do not belong to these communities and who have come to know that, there are other communities in India which celebrate menarche, but their personal communities don't celebrate menstruation and also ask them to follow certain rules and restrictions, these girls feel that they are missing out on a special experience. They have reported a sense of jealousy when they hear about communities where menstruation is celebrated. It is interesting to note that from the insider's perspective, when I spoke to women from these tribes itself who celebrate menstruation and menarche, they have, mixed reviews about these celebrations, but the outsiders who see these rituals and the celebrations feel that they're missing out on something important. Now, again, there is a third category of menstruators pertaining to these. These are girls who may belong to tribes or communities that celebrate menstruation but have moved to bigger cities over a period of time. In these communities, their parents, continue to celebrate menarche, but it has gained a more metropolitan look. The only purpose of celebrating menarche in these communities, even after moving to metropolitan cities, is to, indulge in the nostalgia of those rituals that they performed in their community. But it has taken a more modern form. You will find DJs, you will find global cuisines, you will find no singing of communal songs or folk songs. So this kind of entire change has taken place. And when we are talking about menstrual discourse and understanding associations with menstrual impurity, it is not just limited to menarche. Since I am short on time, I will only be giving an example from 2 tribes. Let's take an example from tribes of Bihar. Here, the women, they are not allowed to perform in any form of sacred rituals or any kind of sacrificial activities at the time of menstruation. In fact, they are so tabooed that their own husbands who are inhabiting the houses while the women are menstruating, they also are not allowed to take part in the rituals. Similarly, we have a tribe in Punjab, which is known as the Bavadia tribe. In this community, the women are supposed to make the prasad for the sacred rituals, but they themselves are not given the prasad, or they're not allowed to make the offerings. They're not allowed to eat the prasad even, or be present in the location where, the sacred rituals take place while they're menstruating. So this kind of impurity rituals are present in a lot of tribes in India. And in Manipur, we have a tribe which feels that menstruation is completely a non-issue. They don't even want to talk about it. So the first time the girl gets her period, they are in shock. They don't even know what menstruation is. But within this community known as the Pati tribe, the women are allowed to go to the church, worship, perform all kinds of rituals, and they're also allowed to, hang their menstrual cloth after washing it in open for everybody to watch. So now when I'm looking at these menstruators and comparing this with what is happening in the in the metropolitan cities, Manvi, if you could just give me 2 minutes, this is something really important that I want to illustrate
Sure,
in my.
sure.
Thank you so much.
Please go.
So I would say, that in the metropolitan cities, while we see that the tribes who when move from their native places, a lot of these tribes migrate to the cities. When they move, they either do not have the economic conditions, or they don't have the privilege of such living situations where they can actually perform the rituals or customs pertaining to menstrual impurity and seclusion that they were originally performing in their own native places. Now that they move to metropolitan cities, maybe because of socio-economic conditions, lack of other family members who can support you while you are keeping yourself secluded, they don't have that luxury when they move to metropolitan cities. So they have actually stopped following a lot of those rituals that I have talked about. But there are also people who are natives of these metropolitan cities who are born and brought up, and they still continue to participate in rituals and customs pertaining to menstrual impurity. And these could be not letting women of their household going to festivals or doing worship during any religious functions. So now the entire premise of my argumentation in the beginning was that there is a stark difference between tribal culture and metropolitan culture. And I feel that also there are points of commonality. Issues pertaining to the discourse of menstruation, even though they vary to a great degree in the two cultural categories of tribal and metropolitan, I feel that when it comes to the etiquettes of paraphernalia, how you handle your pads or your cloth or whatever paraphernalia that you're using to manage your menstruation, there is this common sense of shame that women, irrespective of whether they are from tribal community, living in tribal community, they have come and living in metropolitan cities, or metropolitan natives themselves, these women, irrespective of where they belong to, there is always this sense of shame when they want to use, purchase, or there is any kind of depiction or demonstration of paraphernalia used in fall. Let me give you a small example. I have been living in metropolitan for the last 22 years of my life, and I have been working on menstruation for the last 7 years of my life. I very, very conveniently have gone to people in position and talked about menstrual policy and changes in menstrual leaves in workspaces. But every time, even now, when I'm in a new situation and I have to pull out a pad from my bag, I have to see 10 times what people are thinking around me. This is not something that I'm doing consciously. This is something that has been socialized in us. Despite being somebody who has done so much work in the field of understanding how menstrual etiquettes work and how it is important to address menstruation in the open, talk about it, and display actions that show that menstruation should not be a taboo. This is something unconsciously that still happens with me. Another point of comparison that I feel is when if we have to take metropolitan women from usage of pads to from plastic pads to cloth pads, we have to actually do a lot of effort, because they have been the usage of the menstrual pads has been so popularized through commercial and popular culture that it is so difficult to make metropolitan elite women understand the importance of using cloth pad, because unko ye bataya gaya that cloth pads are dirty. Cloth is a dirty form of managing menstruation. But if you see all the NGOs which are taking initiatives to talk about usage of cloth pads, they go to the tribal communities, they go to the rural communities, and these women are easier to adjust to shifting to cloth pads because they are still using dirty cloths. They have not moved on to plastic pads. They are still using maybe dirty cloths or any other alternate forms. So to make them understand that, okay, use a cleaner cloth. Use a cloth, but use a cleaner cloth is much easier than doing it for metropolitan women. So what I feel is, even though there is so much difference, can we actually say that it is only the educated or the people living in metropolitan or the people who are living in these geographic locations who are more educated, are they more easy to understand, are they more easy to susceptibly understand the discourse around menstruation and how it needs to be changed? Or is it the tribal women who, or women in the rural hearts of India who have still not been commercialized to that extent? Are they more open to change, or are they more easy to initiate that change of moving on to cloth pads? With this, I want to end my presentation by just stating that, you know, as an outsider, I find it really hard to interpret what the, you know, future of menstrual detabooification would be at this point in India. But it makes me very glad that even if it is from the perspective of menstrual hygiene management, or if it is in the cities, it is only from the perspective of, say, you know, telling women that, okay, plastic is bad for the environment, move towards cloth. Even if a little bit of discourse and discussion is happening on menstruation, this is something that gives me hope. And what I hope from achieving from this presentation is that if even one young researcher is excited enough to study this in greater depth and understand how you know, the discourse of menstruation can be taken forward from the discussions happening in the metropolitan spaces to these, you know, tribes, folk cultures, and the rural spaces of India, I think we will have something really interesting coming up in the discourse of menstrual research in India. Thank you so much all for your time, and sorry for taking a little bit of more time. Sorry for exceeding the time limit, but thank you so much, man.
Thank you, Ankita. That was a very elaborate and informative presentation. I have learned a lot from your presentation, and I'm sure everyone here has learned a lot. So I'll just quickly check the chat box. We have a comment from Garima. She says that it was a very enlightening presentation. And she writes, I would like to add that even in Western countries, women keep menstruation-related products discreetly, and it isn't considered polite to talk about this very important and natural topic, which is essential for women's health. So, Ankita, would you like to add something to this?
Yes, I would like to say that, as I said in the beginning, this is not a discussion about tradition and modernity. So when I say that, you know, a Western country, there are women in Western countries who are more modern, more first world than our country, I cannot negate the fact that I cannot homogenize the experiences of women in Western countries. Women in Western countries, even if they belong to America, there are also other subgroups within those Western countries, right? They also belong to some native communities which have their own etiquettes pertaining to menstruation. So if I would, the same way that I have said that comparing and saying ki metro mein rehne wali women are more aware, educated, and more outspoken about menstruation as compared to rural women, no, I would be wrong. Similarly, if I say ki India mein rehne wali women are less open and aware and more discreet as compared to Western, I am also not making that claim. They are also doing it, but everywhere, researchers like us are trying to break free from this kind of discussion, this kind of discretion that we want to you know, do, because these are certain kinds of socializations that we've been brought up with. This is not something a lot of us are doing consciously. What we are doing consciously is trying to break free from these acts, small acts of you know, micro inhibitions that we, you know, perform. And this is a gender performation. This is something we perform just to put on a show. So it does not matter whether you belong to a Western country, you belong to an Eastern country. Irrespective of that, we are still all trying to learn about it.
Right. Thank you so much, Ankita. Let me just check the chat box. So, Dr. Pankaj Sharma congratulates you. And I don't think we have any more questions, but I just wanted to ask something, if you would allow me to ask.
Sure.
So, I mean, you've interacted with so many women from different tribes, and you also mentioned that their experiences are subjective, right? So, as a researcher, how were you able to accommodate all these narratives and voices? Was it very challenging? or I just wanted to understand that.
Do you want to understand this from a like a methodology perspective, or just in terms of how
So
I
in
would
terms of your
compare?
experience, yeah.
Okay.
In terms
So
of your experience.
what I did was, what I felt was, first I had to remove myself from judging these experiences, right? Because we are made to believe that all the rituals and customs that people follow are negative, because they're not aware, they're not educated, and because their experiences are so different from ours, we tend to place this word that they are taboo. So I would say, during the course of discussions with a lot of professors within the department and through the things that I read, I realized that why not talk about these things as etiquettes and not taboo. So I would say, I can't say one etiquette is right and one etiquette is wrong, because etiquette is not something that happens in a vacuum, it happens in a context. So when first I was able to understand that looking at these from the perspective of an etiquette was the right way to go about it, that was something I did. Then I tried to kind of establish, because there were so many experiences, and but there were so many common experiences. So one, I elaborated the commonality of experiences, but I did not want to homogenize. So I did also focus a large part of my research on trying to illustrate how small differences also make up a large segment. For example, I skipped a part in my paper. Within the Manipur tribe, Manipur community, there are two tribes in two different villages. Most of their etiquettes are almost the same, except in the Paiti tribe, the women will go to the church, will do the worship, and they feel that it's fine. Menstruation is happening at school, we'll still worship. There is another tribe from the Lamka village where women do everything else that women in the Paiti tribe do, but they will not go to the church because they feel कि stain किसी को दिख गया. If somebody sees that stain, it'll be a big, a problem in the community. So again, within Manipur also, I would say that कि थोड़े से distance पे भी अगर इतना सा भी difference है, why not highlight that and say that there is so much difference, but there is also a lot of commonality. So if I feel that, because being from a comparative literature department, I think I was equipped with the tools to understand the nitty-gritties of what commonalities and differences make up for a discourse.
Thank you so much, Ankita. I think I have more questions, but I'll keep them for later because we are slightly running short of time.
Thank you.
So thank you once again for an outstanding presentation, Ankita.
Thank you so much, Manvi. Thank you.
Right. So with this, we move on to the last presentation for the session, and I would request Mr. Preeti Sundar to please come forward. Please switch on your video and kindly introduce yourself before you begin with your presentation. Over to you.
Okay, ma'am. I'm Preeti Perinaiki, and I'm MPhil Research Scholar at the Government Arts College, Autonomous Kumbakonam. So thank you for giving this opportunity to produce my article. So this topic is totally a new one for me because I'm from English literature. The tribal life is totally apart from my literature, but I can relate this title with my thesis because my thesis is related to tribal life. So I can relate with this those points, some tribal points, tribal life lives. I can relate with them. So it is very useful for my thesis. Thank you. Then the topic of my presentation is impacts modernization, industrialization, globalization. What are the impacts towards the tribal life from the modernization, industrialization, and globalization? This is my article, the title of the article. I can share with the optimism and pessimism point of view towards the modernization, industrialization, and globalization. I would like to start from the term tribe. The tribe is a denote of a group of people living in that primitive culture and that ancient circumstance. Openly, the economic, the financial support is only they are gained from forest resource, agriculture or hunting. So their economic condition, the financial condition is is most based on their natural resource of forest. So it clearly shows they are the indigenous economy. Then, without doubt, in modernization factors, their financial condition is developed from modernization factors, but they suffer of the present day lifestyle and non-communicable disease. Then, in India, especially in our India, the group of people, the tribe people, is helpless. They are defenseless in every aspect of their. The basic human rights are violated. Then there are primitive cultures. Then there are poverty. They are live in a private society from the larger society. Then they are lack of that roadways, communications, welfare, and education, that safe drinking water. Because it creates a difficult to accept their government technological, their welfare allocated some cashes. They are allocated some cashes because they can't accept that government's technological assistance. Then the scheduled tribes are associated with mostly in primitive characteristics, and they also separate. They followed separate cultures. They followed regional circulation. They are cannot connected with the general public, so they are under development. In India, a vast number of tribals lived in mountains, hills, and forest cover areas. They are a limited population, and they faced some challenging, not just some, there are a lot of challenging they are faced. And they are lived in most of the in our country, especially in West Bengal, Jharkhand, Orissa, Chhattisgarh, Rajasthan, Gujarat, and Maharashtra. Now, I want to divide my article into three main points. First one is modernization, then industrialization, and globalization. First of all, modernization. Modernization is a complex, one of the complex process. It affects their tribal life, their behavior, and their mental processes. Because they followed some ancient cultures, they followed some ethnic cultures. But modernization gives advanced society, so they can't accept the modernization because they followed some religious. They have some system, but modernization gives new one, a better one. It gives some better path to lift their society. But they followed some ethnicity, some cultures, religious, some superstitions. Like they can't accept the modernization factors. The change from primitive and conventional to advanced society, from religious to liberal belief systems, from individualistic, that individual people, indigenous people, perception almost like individuality to communitarianism, success, selectivity, and jointly, from wider family to nuclear family, because they are always gathering and chatting. Likewise, they are always used that circumstance, environment, and so on, is referred to them in evolutionary terms. The modernization is evolutionary one. So modernity entails altering old tradition to make place new one, a better one. In other words, modernity helps in the enrichment that society. It gives value orientation terms, and it gives new values and provide and make a new path, a smooth path to lift their society to image fulfillment. Then, at the intellectual level, modernization entails a massive increase in man's knowledge of his surrounding, as well as the dissemination of this information across society via it gives literacy. mass communication and education. The difference between country, peasant, urban, or tribal, or folk, and upper, not particularly relevant for understanding Indian tribes because they confronted a common external danger to their customary regarding land relation, business, and cultural liberty. Then I want to share an important point, that is education. Normally, education is a vital role played in all over world. Education gives a enhanced learning to make questionable to our people's opinion, and it to create a wider knowledge to the people, especially in tribal life. Education helps to initiate the modernization process by instilling individual a liberal and progressive viewpoint and worldview. Education aids in the preparation of people for their future lives, which is critical for modernization. It assists children in acquiring for all social skills necessary for a better future existence. Learning is a commuting force in history. No civilization can thrive without its people being educated. In colonization period, Christian missionaries were given education to the tribal peoples, that scheduled tribes, so they can enhance they develop their knowledge, and they overcome from their poverty, overcome from their poverty is related to hungry, so that they are always they can they can accept the modernization factors like education. Education is the important role played in their tribal life. Since attainment of independence, the government also launched a number of initiatives, policies, and organizations, as well as allocated cash to various strategies to expand education among tribal people. Then I move to second viewpoint. Second, my point, that is industrialization. That main point. The processing and quarrying industries have accelerated during the last 4 decades, particularly during the plan eras. In tribal India's highland and woodland belts, natural resources have been increasingly exploited, finally contributing to its destruction. The majority of this enterprise arose in or around tribal territories as a result of their abundant minerals and other resources. Small communities built up around this enterprise, mostly housing workers. The modernization, the industrialization gives a job for the tribal people, so they can overcome from their poverty. They developed their own society in the point of view of industrialization. Job vacancies were created as a result of industrialization in tribal communities. However, because the tribal were initially inexperienced, they could only secure work on the bottom echelons. Then local tribe and non-tribal were both harmed from the industrialization evacuation, but it gives job vacancies, it gives job for the tribal people. So it's a balanced one. They are occupied their land, but they give job to the tribal people. Landlords, but they were trying to find ways. The commercial development in tribal regions necessitate the relocation of the native inhabitants frequently to unknown areas. Local tribe and non-tribal were both harmed in these cases of evacuation, but tribal suffered the most because they dominated non-tribal in their locations. Eventually, as functions of intruders, overuse of forest resources, that is the industrialization, tribal economics were mostly based on their forest, began to separated or segregated. As a result of local poverty and the introduction of alternative chances, this tribal people sought to they want to overcome from their poverty. So they were accept the industrialization. They accept the industries in their area. So the tribal people sought working in major industries, vineyards, building sites, and other places. Then I move to third point is globalization. Globalization is a variety of effects on tribal society, some of which are favorable, some of which are determinable. Then that three kinds, that is liberalization, privatization, then globalization, LPG. Places inhabited by indigenous people, the tribal people, have been the target of different uprisings as a result of forced relocation. They are forced from locate from their area because they want to globalize the precious natural resource. So they want to move from their place. The development arena has become a unipolar, as a result of the neoliberal economy. Market forces have created money for their interest at the expense of the livelihood, their economy, and security of these tribes in the territories, all in the guise of improving of their contemporary lifestyle of from the globalization. They accept the globalization and then industrialization and modernization because they want to overcome from the poverty, their circumstances, the crucial circumstance, complicated circumstance. Then the tribal social program should be in line with and harmonious to its manner of living. The government's policies must be realigned to place a greater focus on area-specific solution to take into consideration the nature and extent of local concerns. Only an inclusive strategy combined with the engagement of tribal people in the development process may alter tribal society in the right direction, resulting in quicker growth and improvement in the level of the development of tribal people. It's worth noting that the tribesmen have yet to come from that cohesive and they create powerful and long-lasting political organization. A movement like this would have safeguarded their interest while also preserving their culture, that tribal culture. Social changes and welfare initiative involving these people will be more successful than major development programs, which may continue indefinitely before their effects are seen by the average person. I conclude my article from the point is the 21st century, it has been changes in the relationship between tribes and our society, the larger society, but the tribal have been welfare. They are benefited from the globalization, industrialization, and modernization, but they were as well as chastened due to modernization, industrialization, and globalization. The inducement is on government. The government will want to keep the steadiness between tribal culture and modern culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ms. Preeti, and I'm so sorry for getting your name wrong. I would like to apologize for that. So now let's see if we have any questions for you.
Okay.
As of now, we don't really have any questions. The audience is requested to post questions in the comment box. All right. So we have a question for you. Could you please advise which tribe you have discussed in the presentation? This is a question from Rajula.
I'm not specified any specific tribes, ma'am. I want to view the whole tribal life in India, ma'am.
We have another question for you from Dr. Pankaj Sharma. You talked about government intervention and efforts, but don't you think the real one is on people?
Okay. The modernization, that contemporary lifestyle, the modernization is give a better one, but in the larger society, from instead of the tribal life, they followed some cultures. They have some ethnicity. They have some ancient cultures. They followed some ancient cultures. Uh, in the environment, they want to overcome from their poverty, so they want to follow. They must want to follow. They accepted globalization, industrialization, and modernization. They are balanced. It is this title is challenging for me to balance that their tribal culture society and also the modern culture, the modernization, our industrialization, and then globalization. So it is challenging for me to balance this viewpoint also. So I can enhance to my learning from the point is optimism point of view and also pessimism point of view, ma'am.
All right. Thank you so much for your very interesting paper. I don't see any more questions in the chat box. You may switch off your video now. All right, so now with this, we come to the very end of the 5th session. And once again, I would like to express my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to all of you, all the participants, paper presenters, faculty members, and students for investing valuable time in this webinar. And it merits special mention that none of this would have been possible without you, Patnaik sir. Thank you so much for organizing this deeply insightful webinar. Venkat sir, thank you so much for placing your trust in me and for the technical support throughout all sessions. We are really grateful. And before I sign off, here's a quick reminder. We shall be meeting again at 2 p.m. So we have the 6th session, the last session for this part, scheduled for 2 p.m. We're looking forward to seeing you, and we hope that you will take a lot from here to reflect and think upon. Thank you once again, all of you. See you at 2 p.m.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Manvi, for shouldering the responsibility. And
Thank you for the opportunity.
we will be meeting 2 o'clock, right? Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you.
Have a beautiful Sunday.
Thank you. Thank you.